Hi, everyone. My name is Brielle Nickoloff, and my co-presenter is Surya Vanka. He'll introduce himself in a second. Our talk today is about the missing link of VUI product design, and we're very excited to share a couple of ideas, a couple of observations so far about the field, and hopefully a few ideas moving forward about ways to empower individuals or teams to create these voice experiences.
Hi, my name is Surya Vanka, and I am an industrial designer who found his way into the world of digital. And I've worked for many years in the world of digital, and I spent a lot of time at Microsoft running the Center for Excellence there, and now I run a consultancy called Authentic Design.
So I am a product manager at Botmock, and my mission at Botmock is to ask real voice designers and conversation designers of chatbots what their design process is already like and create a tool that empowers their entire team to easily launch a voice experience. And my talk will get into why this looks different now than in a graphic design field. But yeah, I'll just jump right into sort of what we have identified as one of the missing pieces so far. So right now, if you're a designer, we have the framework in place for consumers to access these experiences. We have a lot of smart speakers with very high adoption rates. You can access a voice assistant experience on a smartphone. So that framework took a few years to sort of get into place, but now we're there. And then we've got platforms like Dialogflow, the Alexa Skills Kit, and Bixby's developer platform. And those are free and accessible to everyone as well. But as I'm sure most people attending this talk know, there are so many Alexa skills that are just not used, like over 100,000 out in the skill store, and so many are just sitting there, not really usable. Because we have all of these experiences being generated, but we haven't really backed up yet to think about what a really good one sounds like. And we haven't really backed up to think about what kind of tools would help the people that are building those experiences. We are kind of stuck. And what Surya and I really want to go into is A, what kinds of tools could that look like? And B, what sorts of processes can we use while actually employing these tools? And so if we kind of contextualize this in terms of how the graphic design industry evolved, you can think about a designer with an idea in their head. And how is that designer going to get this visual from their brain into another person's brain as that end user is actually looking at a device, whether it's a computer or a smartphone, etc. So when this industry first began, the design and build and distribute phases were all kind of clumped into one step. And so you had people creating graphic interfaces using a language that the computer understood, and not necessarily that a designer could or would want to sort of learn how to use. And so that led to really bad things like this, just highly unusable experiences that are not the best way to actually organize information, even if it is very, very pretty and rainbow colored. So because of that, everybody again kind of took a step back, and we were like, what kinds of people would be good at architecting information and creating information that is easy to digest? And that's sort of where the whole field of UX and UI design emerged. That's kind of where it was born. We took a step back and said, let's really start planning our creations out and be mindful about the way that we want to launch them. And so in that design phase, we started very lo-fi. So you can grab a marker, you can use pen and paper to create quick wireframes. And out of that, tools like Illustrator, Figma, and Sketch sort of came to the landscape. And then you had tools like WordPress and Squarespace that were even further contextualizing this design, build, and distribution process. So you're now empowering a designer to basically build and create something that they can visualize in their head, all in the same sort of environment that the computer understands as well, and a developer understands. Because whatever you create in Squarespace or WordPress, it is automatically kind of backed by this technical handover. You're empowering the designer to create what they're best at creating. You're empowering the developer to create what they're best at creating. And ultimately, this leads to a better end user experience. And so right now in voice, we're still sort of missing this best design suite. If you ask around to various designers, you'll find that we're sort of hacking together lots of different tools to build them. And in my own experience, I began as a voice UX designer. I would use kind of a variety of different things like Google Docs and Sheets and Lucid Charts, that kind of thing. That's fine and dandy, but the problem is when you're trying to scale a massive design that can really account for all the different things that your team wants it to, that's when those like linked processes sort of start to break down. And so again, right now at Botmock, what I'm really trying to find out is what kinds of processes are teams kind of repurposing from their graphic design process, and how, like, what do they want to keep from that? What don't they want to keep from that? And what kind of tool can we create out of that to empower a whole team to create a voice user interface? Of course, we've already got in place the Dialogflow, the Alexa Skills Kit, Bixby Developer Studio. And so we're still wondering, is it flowcharting? And obviously flowcharting is kind of a dirty word right now in voice because it has so many limitations for what it can do for a very robust design. But the other thing is that you're always towing this line between overloading somebody with visual input and actually being completely comprehensive for what your design needs to account for. So that's kind of the line we're towing right now with voice design tools. Flowcharting, there's a place for it, but that can't be the only part of the design and planning and architecting process. A lot of people use Google Sheets. Most designers agree at this point that you need to start with sample dialogues to actually create a usable experience. So a lot of people will start in some sort of text editor and then sort of build out from there into a flowchart. And in the words of Rebecca Evanhoe, one brilliant designer, she mentioned the other day that the flowchart should be sort of what is serving the sample script. And so a lot of my conversations right now with people are really centered around trying to figure out what kind of tool would allow a designer to take what's in their head and create and build at the same rate as they're thinking about the design. And then of course that tool still needs to be able to speak the language of the building tools and the distribution tools like Dialogflow and the others. So just one quick look at a couple of the conversations I've had with people. For example, like we need one source of truth. And a lot of designers and teams right now have 400, 500 prompts for one single voice experience. And keeping track of all of that it gets completely impossible if you're not using some sort of tool like Sheets. Sometimes a member of the team who is designing is simply concerned with the actual content. Like they are writing the content, they are crafting the language, and they are not necessarily that concerned with the way that you're structuring the entities or the variables or the more technical side of things, even though that is still part of the design process. So really what I think will start to get us closer to building a tool that a whole team can really use is thinking about who on a team is going to be kind of involved in the conversation. So product people, designers, developers, UX researchers, everybody that needs to sort of have a one touch point for how they're keeping track of everything. And then being able to add features into one tool that sort of allows each of those people to do what they need to do, whether it's sharing a PDF file with their client or their partner, whether it's being able to just write out all of the content and make sure that they're not rewriting prompts that have already been written, which is nearly impossible in a flowchart form. So this is another look at one example of a template that I've used in the past when I was designing. And you can see this is just Google Docs. And down here we've got, like, we basically used like IDs so that we could be completely comprehensive, but still write it out in a linear fashion and not have it be kind of stuck or tied to a flowchart, if that makes sense. And generally, yeah, the digital design process, as it has sort of come to evolve till now, really evolved around visual content. And same with the development process. So once we can find a good way to adapt the tooling and the current design processes that we have, which Surya is now going to go into, once we can do that to serve a non-visual medium, it's going to be just a lot easier for all of us to create good voice experiences. And yeah, I really wanted to focus sort of on the practical tooling side of things, and Surya has a proposal for a process that teams can use to kind of unlock the creativity of a team sort of in different contexts. And one of the contexts, of course, can be voice design. So with that, I will hand it over to Surya.
One of the things that Brielle pointed out in her talk, which is really a key to what we're doing, is as the digital world has evolved, right? It has gone from being simply about GUI to, of course, being a lot of other things, right? It's become about gesture, it's become motion, and it's become about voice and conversational interfaces. But all of those things that we do today have their roots in the processes that we created for creating visual interfaces. But now conversational interfaces are increasingly becoming the way that businesses are going to provide consumers, users with the relevant information, the contextual information. But now they can do it without that traditional learning curve that came with interface technology. So when we're trying to do this, though, at this particular moment, the challenge is we're still in this Wild West phase. Every conversation designer and every visual interface designer is just sort of doing it in their own way. Designers are grappling with new concepts and considering a variety of things. They're trying to understand the nature of human language. They're trying to understand how you reduce ambiguity, right? How to anticipate intent, right? They're trying to deal with a world where scenarios diverge very, very quickly. In the graphic user interface world, scenarios do diverge, but in the visual interface world and conversation design, they diverge wildly. So these methods are still forming, and these methods are still coming together, and a shared body of knowledge is growing. And so that's the context within which we are speaking, of course. We've got a lot of tools. I mean, here we're looking at a screen of Figma. We notice that the way designers are creating GUIs tend to have a bunch of screens which are tied together using these tools. We also know that as they go through processes, there are a number of steps that precede that, right? They work on wireframes. They work on scenarios, right? So there's an entire set of very well-baked processes that have developed over the course of the last 25 years. And underlying all of those, of course, is what these processes are going through is the design thinking process, right? And so they're processes that are tied to gaining empathy, processes tied to defining problems, right? Processes which have to do with how you create ideas, how you prototype ideas, how you validate ideas, how you test, how you iterate, and so on. And all of these are kind of baked into the tools that we have today, which are primarily tuned to the needs of graphical user interfaces. But the design thinking process is something that's far more elastic and is applicable to all kinds of interfaces and all kinds of design, including conversation design. So my own mission is based on a conviction that the design thinking process is something that can be used to unlock raw human creativity and direct it towards results, right? And my mission and the mission of authentic design is to unleash the creativity of every person by unleashing the design thinker in every person and organization to become a value creator. So essentially methods that are able to go from that fuzzy front end space where there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of exploration of problem space into outcomes that stick. And we've got a method that works. Now, I've been taking this and trying to formalize this into heuristics and into problem-solving surfaces by using process maps. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is all problems are not the same. Some problems look like this, and a lot of conversation design problems share some of these aspects, that there's a lot of uncertainty which you have to first orient yourself around and frame and move to a solution. Some look like this, particularly problems which are just about iterating on details. And there's some problems, and today a lot of conversation design problems look like this. They are just really challenging. So what I was doing was initially taking the graphic user interface design, the industrial design process, and turning it into very simple process maps. Here's an example of a process map, and this method's called design swarms, where people could come together and walk through the entire journey of the design thinking process step by step to be able to move from traversing problem space and then eventually traversing solution space to getting to a result. But I realized a single map doesn't fit all problems, so it required more a kit of maps that could come together differently. So there's some problems that look like this. There are problems that have a lot of sort of fuzzy front end to them. Other problems are like this. And there's some problems which are much more straightforward, and some problems have a lot less time which they need to be solved in. So these process maps look like this, and they come together to create a problem-solving surface. This is called the design swarms method, and it's a select collection of 15 process maps which can be configured in different ways to solve most problems. And when people use these maps, they work through them, and this is done both, it can be done in person or it can be done remotely, but they work through them. It kind of looks like this as people begin by forming and orienting themselves, and then they go to understanding the human that they're going to be serving. And then from that, they go to understanding problems by creating journey maps, extracting adaptations, understanding challenges. They go ahead and extract needs, and from those needs, they create rigorous definitions of problems, and from that they understand exactly what they're going to solve, and they go through the entire process of ideation, and from ideation they'll go through validation and storyboard a solution and create a proposal. So that's an approach, and the fundamental approach over here is something which extracting from all the processes that have been used for GUI, have been used for industrial design, have been used for service design. These maps lead people through a prescriptive series of steps. These maps have been used. The design swarms process has been now used around the world for a number of different solutions. And here you see a bunch of solutions which have been used for primarily social impact, but they're also used in some of the largest businesses today like Microsoft and Amazon and a bunch of other places. So coming back to what Brielle was talking about, right? So there is this notion, we are right now traversing, going from old classical design to this whole notion of design thinking. Now we've got computation design at scale, right? This is where voice user interfaces, conversation starts to come into the picture. So the key idea in this talk that Brielle and I exploring and creating is, what would it be like to have such highly prescriptive maps that allow people to unleash their creativity and get to an outcome when they are focused towards the conversation design process, just like we've successfully been able to do it for the GUI process.
This is not a space in which we need to completely reinvent the wheel. We've identified what doesn't really work and we've identified potential things that can work, and being able to leverage the design process that has evolved till now will, I think, really help us out in this space. One thing that you mentioned on your process map slide was that one section where you say, let's understand the user completely. And that is something that most teams nowadays, when you're creating any type of solution, you try to really empathize with the user and put yourselves in their shoes. And when it comes to language, it's never been more important to really do that, where if you're creating a website, we kind of have we've sort of trained we've trained everyone to know what a hamburger menu looks like and what it does for you and what the little X in the top corner will do for you if you click it. But with voice,
we just don't have the common patterns and practices still, because it's a new field. It's in the Wild West. So everyone's making them up. And this is exactly what is happening 25 years ago in GUI.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. So, so we don't have those patterns yet, but not only that, but those patterns might never emerge between languages, because language is so specific to one locale. Even within English, you have Australians phrasing questions differently than American English speakers. So the best practices that emerge may not be as streamlined as happened in the graphic design field. And that in itself is going to take a much more flexible approach to solving these problems, like Surya outlined in his design swarms process. So once we can, go ahead.
I think that's a really important point you make, because in GUI, there was a learning curve that we accepted, that when somebody's starting using a GUI, we accepted that there would be a learning curve. It would take a certain amount of time before they learn to use a Windows user interface or a Macintosh user interface, or how to learn Microsoft Word, or how to learn Lotus 123. But with conversation interfaces and the expectation of instant use, right? Because we are that's the opportunity and the expectation, and also the variability between languages and cultural norms tends to be such that now structurally things are also quite different in a different language. So that's a really insightful point that you make.
Yeah, thanks, Surya. So it's very exciting to sort of be doing this talk with you, because I think what we both bring to the table in terms of the problem I'm trying to solve with creating a tool that really works for this framework, and your approach to having a process that is flexible enough to be used to solve any kind of problem, including conversation design. I think that the combination of these is very exciting, and I'm excited to see sort of what the future holds when we can combine.
That's right. And the plan is really to start to launch very soon design swarms workshops for conversation design, where we're building out these process maps now. which actually go through not just the GUI process and not just processes for sort of space or hard product, but actually to extend this method to be able to take on some of the hard problems in conversation design.
The problems I'm trying to solve by creating a usable tool for conversation designers, and the problems that Surya is trying to solve in creating a process that can work for all kinds of problem-solving contexts, is very exciting to me. And combining forces with these two things, I think, can really help lead us into the phase of voice and conversation design that will lead us to the most usable, or at least a baseline that teams can finally start to use to have a collaborative process when building these conversational interfaces.
There's a phrase that you've used before, I think, which is very handy, which is this is how we go create the brave new voice first world.
Yes, we can finally create the brave new voice first world with the correct processes and the correct tools to actually enable us to do it.